This episode of The Imperfects contains discussions of addiction and suicidal thoughts. If this is something you don't want to listen to right now, perhaps skip it. But we do suggest you come back when you're ready, as it's a really important discussion.
My name is Andy, and I film the videos at The Imperfects. I'm the son of English immigrants, and I am grateful to call Australia home. We at The Imperfects acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded, and extend our respects to their elders past and present. I am inspired by the strength and endurance of the world's oldest living culture, and we draw on and pay homage to their traditions of story when we share stories on our podcast.
We have a little bit of a different episode for you today. It's a special one. We're joined today by Jack.
Hello. Might need a bit more information than that, Hugh.
Well, the information I'll give you is that...
Everyone can fill in the dots.
Yeah, you can work it out from there. So this episode is coming out because this is not a usual course to ending up in a podcast episode, but we were sitting in a cafe, the four of us, Ryan, Josh, Bridget and myself, and we were approached by a young man, who's Jack, and he came over to say basically that he really enjoyed the podcast said some really nice things about the podcast.
Yeah, we're like, this guy sounds great.
We got to get him on air to say how much he loves the podcast.
So he's here to talk about how much he loves our podcast. We want you guys to hear what he said. It was really nice. And then you're about to leave. I hope you don't mind me saying, but you sort of did appear to be really, really nervous when you came over.
Definitely.
And then you went to walk away and you sort of changed your mind and sort of came back and just said that you had reached out to me previously.
It would have been about 2 years ago. And I just left rehab for my gambling addiction. And I actually read your book, The Resilience Project.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to show my gratitude. So I wrote you a gratitude letter.
That's right.
Dropped it off here.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
At the studio. And then about 2 weeks later, you sent me a text because I left my number on the bottom. You sent me a text just saying how much the letter meant to you. And then, I saw you guys walk into the cafe and my mate was like, is that those Imperfect guys? And I was like, yep, that's them.
That's the podcast.
Yeah. So I was toing and froing whether to come and say hello. And then as we got up and left, I was like, I probably won't get this opportunity again. So.
Yeah, so that's right. So you came over and as you're about to leave, you turned and said, and you recounted that you'd sent me a letter and I remembered it and I remember sending you a message back.
Yeah.
And you sort of shared a little bit of your story with us around your gambling addiction.
Yep.
And as you left, we had quite a long conversation afterwards about how moved we were by, first of all, the letter you wrote me, but then also the fact that you came and said hi and that you were happy enough to share your story with us.
Yeah. And
then we were just talking about what a huge issue gambling is in this country. It's a huge, huge health and social problem we have in Australia with addiction to gambling, the way it's advertised through all forms of media. I read the other day and sort of reading up on for this episode, but we have there are 945 ads every day for gambling on our televisions in Australia. We lose more money than it is a bigger problem for Australia than anywhere else in the world.
Per capita.
Per capita. And it's getting worse and worse. I won't bore you with stats. There's just one more I wanted to say that in 2011, I believe it was 11% of the population were online gambling, and now it's up to, in 2019, it was up to 31%. And so it's just a huge problem. So when you spoke about that to us, we sort of thought, wouldn't it be great to have Jack join us to talk about his story? Because you do hear a lot of people who are struggling with gambling addiction, but then to hear someone who's actually made their way through and come out the other end, I think would be really great for people to listen to.
Yep.
And so we contacted you and pretty much begged you to come and join us on the episode. And as someone who listens to the podcast, I think it wasn't straight away like, yeah, I'll definitely do it. It was something you had to think about a lot. But we are so happy that you agreed to join us. Yep. It's a really special thing that you're, a very generous thing you're willing to do today. So
it's also, I mean, that on top of the fact that a big part of what we do here and the reason we talk to people is because when you often it's like well-known people or celebrities or something, and they will, on the face of it, seem like they've just got their shit together and everything's great. And then obviously you dig a little deeper and find out that it's not. And I think the other part of it, this is just from me, when we met you, you were just like, I was like, oh, it's just a regular, lovely guy,
Yep.
and you are, regular, lovely guy. And why should I? But I would have no idea that you would have, such a big part of your life for the last however many years is been dealing with a gambling addiction.
Yep.
Like that is something that, of course, you've been dealing with. I mean, of course, the people that close to you know about it, but most people you meet may not know this about you.
Yeah.
And it just felt like it was just such a perfect thing to explore on this show, because that is this sort of like, I guess you could call it like an imperfection, like we all have, but it's this thing that you struggle with behind the scenes.
Yep, definitely. And I think as well with gambling is it carries so much shame. Where 2 years on from leaving rehab, I'm in a position now where I'm not ashamed of the fact that I was a compulsive gambler, and I'm proud of my recovery, and I'm proud of telling my story. Where if you go back 2 or 3 years ago, being a compulsive gambler, I just kept everything hidden. And I think it's because it's so socially accepted, gambling, that if you put your hand up and say, oh, I've got a problem, people just think, I don't know, I think, people just jump to the conclusion that you're weak or that gambling's got control over you. But I always thought that being a gambler, that was the problem, but gambling for me was a solution. And the problem was whatever was going on in my life at that time. So that's what, going through rehab that 4 weeks, it kind of flipped it, thinking like, all right, if I address what's going on in my life, then naturally I won't be gambling.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, so it's quite a complex story.
Yeah.
Can we start with maybe a good place to start is just at your worst as someone with a gambling addiction? What was life like for you?
Yeah. So at the worst, I couldn't go more than a day without gambling.
And this is, I'm guessing this is online gambling. It's like...
Yeah, sports betting, horses. I'd bet on absolutely everything. Looking back on it, I thought I do love my sport, but I thought I just loved every sport out there, where I was betting on, AFL, cricket, European handball, you name it, I would just have a crack at it.
And does that include, like with European handball, for example, was part of your gambling on it, like finding out about the sport, whereas otherwise you maybe wouldn't have found out about the sport?
No, not really. Like, it's just for a gambler, it doesn't really matter what the sport is. It's just that thrill of chasing a win. Definitely don't know the rules of European handball. What didn't help as well was my previous career, I was in stockbroking. So working with money, around money, probably fed that kind of obsession of getting a win, whether that's kind of making money for clients. But I was also investing in cryptocurrencies. So it didn't just stop at sports betting and horse racing. But I couldn't go a day without betting. Even at work, I would spend 10, 15 minutes in the toilets, just putting bets on. And then, a lot of my betting was on my own. I lived by myself for a stretch of 2 or 3 years. So I'd just go home and, watch the races, often late at night, and then put bets on that would go in overnight, wake up every few hours, checking bets. And
in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and just repeat that process.
Did you feel it at the time? You're thinking this is a serious problem, or were you just like and trying to resist it, or were you just
definitely knew at the time, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And almost to mask those feelings of like, what situation am I in right now? To mask those feelings and to get out of that pain or escape those emotions, I would just gamble more. Which then you wake up the next morning just feeling even worse because you've still got those problems and then they're just compounded.
So is that the gambling more, is that sort of an attempt to make back money that you've lost, or what's the thinking with that?
Yeah, so it's a combination of that, but then also my gambling, I would use it as a form of escape. So if I felt overwhelmed, even throughout my whole childhood, I would be shocking at communicating, being able to express my emotions. So gambling for me was an escape where if I felt overwhelmed or life was just putting up some challenges, then often I'd be gambling as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how old are you when you started gambling?
Depends what you technically define as gambling. So if we go by Gamblers Anonymous, lottery tickets or scratchies would be counted as gambling, which probably as like a 7-8-year-old, I absolutely loved scratchies. But first proper gamble would have been when I went to the races. I would have been about 15 years old. I was probably the last one in my year to mature, and my best friend, he was probably the first one to mature. So we went to the races together. He was putting on the
Look
bets.
like a dad and son.
Yeah, we honestly looked like it. He was about 2 times taller than me. And we went to some country races, and that was the first kind of taste of winning, and that thrill of just the sound of hearing horses running down the straight. That gave me a bit of a buzz. And then from there, just, I don't know, Melbourne Cup, even at school. I went to school back in Perth, and we would stop for the race. So, which when I look back on it now, it's interesting that a school would stop for a horse race. But then it was progressive in nature. So it just got worse and worse kind of as the years went on.
Can I I don't mean to like dwell in the time when it was really, really bad, but the first thing I think of is like who knew about your addiction in your circle of friends or family? Like did anyone know? And,
No.
and how did it, and if they did or didn't know, how did it affect just relationships generally?
Yeah. So even my closest friends who I'd go to the races with or go to the pub and be punting, even they didn't know. So often we would go to the pub, we would watch like a race meeting on TV, and then after the last race, they would stop gambling. But I would often either call the night off early and just go home and be gambling by myself, or I would just be subtly doing it as the night went on. So we would still be out having drinks, and I would still be gambling. So I kept it very hidden from friends and family. At its worst, I was just beating myself up, just for kind of falling into that trap. I felt very isolated because I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about it, because for me, it felt like I was carrying so much shame and guilt. But I was just spiraling. So I'd often go on kind of gambling binges and then try and go like a month or 2. But when it was at its worst, it would be, as I said before, I'd struggle to get through 24 hours without putting a bet on.
When you were getting that first sort of rush and high when you were 15, when you were gambling and that thrill, did it feel at the time like it was an escape from something, or do you know, and you don't have to go too personal if you don't want to, but I'm kind of curious to know if there was something that you're escaping from.
Yeah, probably at that age, it didn't necessarily feel like an escape. It wasn't until I went to rehab that, the therapists in there kind of unpacked it. I've got some childhood trauma where I kept that hidden even up until I went into rehab. So that's where kind of my inability to communicate, like I kept a secret from the age of probably 7 or 8 years old, and just keeping secrets and learning just to kind of keep my mouth shut and not opening up to people. So to answer your question, it's probably at 15, I wasn't fully aware of that, but it was when it became really problematic. That's when it was probably more of that escape mechanism.
Do you remember when when it started to transition from being something that felt manageable and sort of okay in your mind to something, this isn't right, like I want to stop but I can't?
Yeah, it was probably in the last 5 years when it got really out of control. Before that, I could contain it to like Saturday races or just betting on the AFL. But I guess after I'd left university, got a full-time job, the stress that was causing, and I guess just maturing and growing up, and dealing with life on life's terms, it just became, probably something that I turned to more was the gambling. Yeah.
Did you imagine that you could ever conquer this?
When I was, probably not. There was an event that happened probably 2.5 years ago that kind of led to me hitting like the lowest of lows. And that caused me to actually pick up the phone, call mum and dad and say, I need help. And 2 days later, I was in rehab.
Wow.
But leading up to that point, I didn't even know about Gamblers Anonymous. It wasn't until I was in rehab where they said, instead of doing an AA meeting with everyone else here, why don't you go up into your room and you can do an online Zoom with a GA meeting? I was like, oh, great. There's a network out there.
So you hadn't done any sort of research on addiction or anything?
No, and I hadn't. I think I was too embarrassed to be able to pick up the phone and call Gamblers Helpline, which is a great resource and something that I know about now, and people should use it more, and go on the Gamblers Anonymous website and find a meeting. But I just didn't have the guts to be able to pick up the phone, speak to someone and say, I've got a problem, which is, I guess, step one of the GA program is admitting that you're powerless over your addiction and life's become unmanageable. At that point, I wasn't able to say, put my hand up and say I'm powerless.
I find it really hard to hear after we've just heard what you were going through to then say to yourself, I didn't have the guts.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really tragic.
At that point, like, was there any ounce of joy in gambling for you left, or was it all dark for you?
It was all pretty dark. Like, if I had a win, it would last. Yeah, that joy would probably maybe last a couple of seconds, and then I would be finding the next race to put it on. But a good example of how it was such a coping mechanism for me, I went into rehab on a Monday, and on that Sunday before, I knew I had to tell those closest to me that I was taking some time away just because I wouldn't have my phone for 4 weeks. So I was sitting in a park, bawling my eyes out, sending out messages to those that I needed to tell.
So you're in a park. This is like before you've called your parents, or you've already called your parents?
I'd already called my parents, and now it's just sending a message to those friends that were closest to me. And I was in a very, very dark place. I was in a park sending these messages, and between each message, I was putting down some like very, very large bets. And I literally could not have cared if they won or lost. And when they did lose, like that just didn't faze me at all. But just for that kind of 90 seconds that race was on, it provided relief, and it got me out of that, how I was feeling. Like I was feeling so overwhelmed by just what I was going through, knowing I was going to rehab the next day, that just for 90 seconds, it was this like instant relief of like, oh, I can just like focus on this bet. I've got some money on it. That's a bit of a thrill. But then, as soon as that race was over, it would just hit me again.
Is there anything and this, I'm expecting the answer to be no here, but is there anything, like on your smartphone, it can show you what your screen time is. You can look into all the data of like, this is how many times you've picked it up. Is there anything in a betting app that shows you your percentage of winning and losing?
It's hard to say just because I haven't been in an app for a couple of years now. I'm hoping that they would have. I know that I think just when I was trying to get help, they were sending reports, like a monthly report of how much money was coming in and out, which was a new addition.
But do say the words gamble responsibly.
Yeah.
So sure.
But even getting that email, like I'll delete it straight away.
You told me that didn't help. Those words, gamble responsibly, didn't help you.
But even getting that email, like I'll delete it straight away. I was way too ashamed. Like I don't want to see how much money I'm losing. Like that's going to make me feel even worse. So
it seems like your brain had trained, you trained your brain, and vice versa. That when to get out of feelings of unease, of sadness, of depression, or whatever it was, gambling was the fix.
Yeah.
So for a gambling company to then send you an email that says this is how much money you lost, what do you think you're going to do when you see that?
Yeah.
Like it's just going to make you depressed and gamble
It's
again.
counterproductive.
Yeah.
True. So when you were really like, what was happening? What got so bad? What was the sort of scenario? I guess I'm trying to like put my finger on and try to understand what happened that made you know, okay, this is bad enough to call
Maybe
my
get help.
parents. Yeah.
Yeah, so probably 2.5 years ago, I was in a relationship and I very, very shamefully slept with someone at work, and which in itself obviously carried a lot of shame and guilt and remorse. And about 4 weeks after that had happened, so I kept that to myself, just because that's the way. Yeah, I was just always prone to keeping secrets to myself. And 4 weeks had passed. I was trying to come to terms with my actions internally, because I never thought I was a bad person, but my actions said otherwise. And 4 weeks later, I got a message from the person at work who I'd slept with. And we were working from home, so it was just via Skype. And she said, "Oh, do you mind if we have a conversation after work today?" And I thought that was quite strange, so obviously said yes. And then she called me over the work phone and said, "Oh, just giving you a heads up, I'm pregnant and you're the father."
Oh my God.
So instantly I just went into absolute denial and said, "No, this can't be happening. It's not possible. I'm in a relationship. Like, I'm trying to come to terms with like the way I've acted. You can't put this on me." And just the position I was in, struggling with my gambling, and then also having to, deal with just the kind of repercussions of my actions. Instantly just where I was at and just spiraling. I just said, like, I can't be involved. Like, are you sure about this? You need to like go and get some like professional advice on like what it means to be like a single mum. And she was like, "Yeah, look, like I haven't made a decision yet, but give me 4 weeks." So I left it for 4 weeks. There wasn't any more communication. And then 4 weeks later, she said, "Oh, look, I've made a decision, and I'm definitely going ahead with it." She was she was adamant that I was the father, and like it's no possibility that it was anyone else. Even leading up to that point, like I was shocking at communicating. Like I just kept secrets to myself. And as they say in the program, like secrets keep you sick. And for the next 4 months, I just became, very, very depressed to a point where I just from keeping it to myself and keeping that secret. And it got to a point where I was just physically sick. I wasn't sleeping. It was affecting my work. And just over that period of time, my gambling got even more out of control. I was gambling every day. And I think as time passed, I realized that I had to, like, there's no way out of this situation. Like, this child's going to be born, and at some point they're going to want to know who their father is. And just that guilt of not being involved in itself, like, just became too much. So there was one night where I was seeing a psychologist, and they just said, start writing if you get overwhelmed. And it was about 3 a.m. and I started writing. And then as I was kind of finishing, I wrote a page, and I'd finished that page. And as I was reading it back, it honestly just sounded like I was at the end of my life, and I didn't want to live anymore. That was probably the lowest of lows. And it was the next morning where I called up my mum and dad and just said, "Guys, this is the situation. Like, I need help. Like, I've got a gambling problem. I've had a gambling problem for a while, but at this point in time, like, I feel so isolated, overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm at the crossroads. Like, fortunately, I did call my parents and I didn't go down the other pathway, but it was that phone call, and they were just amazing. They were so supportive. They didn't care they didn't care about my actions. They didn't judge me. And I think I called them on the Saturday, and then that next Monday I was in rehab.
Thank you so much for telling us that. That is, wow. It sort of just makes me think of the saying, in for a penny, in for a pound, which is the literal meaning, of course, is like the money, which is like in gambling. It's like in for a penny. Like once you make that first bet, you've broken the seal and you just see gambling. But what it actually also applies to, just you telling that story, is the secrets. And it's actually, I'd never thought about it in terms of how keeping your gambling addiction a secret essentially trains you to become this incredible secret keeper.
Yeah.
And probably makes you feel like it's just a part of your life. So one more secret, like this secret with this person you slept with, and the pregnancy is like, well, that's, I keep secrets.
That's who I am.
That's who I am.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel, obviously it felt like a big thing, but the secret side of it is the part of yourself that I guess you just learn to live with and accept.
Yeah, and it is very draining though, like having that web of lies where for like a lot of gamblers or just anyone in addiction, like you're prone to lying just to cover up what you're doing or your actions. So I think just that having that web of lies, it just takes it out of you, just because you got to lie on a lie on a lie, and it's just not how you want to live your life. Like you beat yourself up, you're so hard on yourself, you're your biggest inner critic. And for a lie that is so big like that, like just sitting with that for knowing what was going on and then trying to live a normal life. And doing that for months just took its toll on me. And I think that's the most difficult part about like that whole story, is just how much pain I inflicted on those close to me, and how it's possible to act in such a way. But yeah, just knowing I had, inflicted that pain. But the 4 weeks at rehab, there was a lot of telling my story, and I guess forgiving myself that I was practicing. So I was in a much better position to be able to forgive myself and say, like, from this point onwards, you're gonna be a good person. So,
And you're a dad now?
I am a dad now to a beautiful little daughter.
How old is she?
She is just coming up to 19 months. So, I get to see her, once or twice a week. So I spent yesterday with her, and I'm in a new relationship so I met a girl at uni. So quit my last job because obviously stockbroking, probably not the industry for a compulsive gambler. Went back to uni doing a master's of teaching, and met the most amazing woman who is so supportive of me. And we actually, the time that we really connected was when I told her my full story, and she told me some of the battles she was going through. So we were friends for the first probably 3 or 4 months of uni, and then went from there, and we've been in a relationship since.
I've never used a betting app. I don't actually know how it works. I've seen people use it, but how quickly, if you were doing it secretly, how long does it take to from your phone being in your pocket to then your phone being back in your pocket? Approximately how long would it take to put a bet on?
I could put a bet on in probably 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Even less than that.
So it almost just looks like you're checking your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difficult thing with gambling is as an addiction, because everyone carries around a phone and there's so many different betting apps. So at any point, if someone gets an urge to gamble, they just can get out their phone and within 15, 20 seconds, they can put a bet on and then they've relapsed. Whilst I think with a lot of other addictions, and I don't necessarily like to compare with Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, but there's often a bridge you have to overcome. If you're an alcoholic, you have to go down the shops and buy alcohol. So I think with gambling, And why it's such a big problem is because everything's just on your phone. Like unless you totally removed your phone, which I was fortunate to do for 4 weeks in rehab, which made such a big difference. But without that, it would have been even more difficult.
What are the actual apps, without naming the apps, but what do the apps do to support you? Like what do the companies do to support you if it's clear that you've run out of money or you don't have money to put in there or you just haven't been gambling for a while? Is there any help from them or is it like...
No, I would say that they do the opposite. So when I was at my worst and I didn't have much money to my name, it got so bad that I had an account manager with one of the betting companies. So they would actually call me every couple of days.
They called you?
A person
They
calls
called
you.
me. I had a personal contact at the betting company and they called me and they would say, Jack, if you deposit $100, we'll give you $300 extra. Like, can you do that right now?
Oh my God.
That is absolutely fucked.
Yeah. And at the time, like, I might have just be able to kind of meet that because I was living kind of pay to pay. So I would, as a gambler, I would get sucked in.
Of course,
So I'd deposit, and then with that money would last maybe a couple of hours max, and then I'm back to square one.
And then would they call again?
Yeah, in a couple of days. And at one point, I got a phone call, and they said, Jack, do you enjoy your AFL? Like, we can see you bet on it quite a bit. And I was like, yeah, like I love my footy. And they're like, do you want a couple of tickets to the footy this weekend? You can come into,
my God.
I won't name the betting company, but you can come into the box. And because I kept...
This is an absolute fucking disgrace.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
No. Because I kept my addiction to myself, I had no one to take to the footy. So I just let the tickets pass because I couldn't go up to a friend and say, I've got 2 tickets to the footy. We're going to be in the box, because my mate would have been like, hang on, like how on earth do you get footy tickets? Like how much money you're putting down? So
I'm fuming.
Yeah.
I can't believe this. I mean, on one hand, it doesn't surprise me, but it's just so, like you said, Hugh, it's a fucking disgrace.
I'm actually trying to picture an analogy in my mind for this, and I actually can't picture one. I can't think of an analogy.
The analogies to like narcotics or alcohol seem insane. I mean, you could make the probably clearer analogy is to say like, a beer company, if they somehow know that you haven't bought beer in a while and they say, do you want to come and drink some beer in our box?
Here's a slab.
Here's a slab. Like that is sort of the equivalent, I think.
Yeah.
But that seems bizarre.
Is it like a drug dealer saying you haven't been for a while? But
Here's some free drugs.
Yeah, but the drug dealer will be like a guy called Craig. It wouldn't be a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Yeah.
And was that you definitely don't give the name, but was it the same person that called? Like, was there a relationship built between?
And because I felt
so
isolated and trapped from my gambling, having that person calling me, like it made me feel special. I was like, this person's like taking interest in me.
There's a connection and a relationship.
He was aware of my gambling, and it was almost this relief that like, someone's aware that I'm gambling, like as much as I am. So
it is such a hideously predatory industry.
Yeah.
To be doing that to, so I can't remember who should be credited with this quote. I can't remember if it was someone like Oprah or a Prince Harry or I don't know. I was going to say Johan Hari. He's probably not in that category, but one of those really awesome people said.
Ryan Shelton? No, it wasn't him.
It might have been.
Could have been Shelton.
Yeah, I can't remember. One of those great people said, we need to stop when we see someone with an addiction struggling or a mental illness. We need to stop saying what's wrong with you. We need to start saying what's happened to you.
Yeah.
And you sort of alluded to before that you experienced some childhood trauma. Yeah. Now you don't need to go into that if you don't feel comfortable. That's not what I'm not trying to take down that path if you don't want to. I just guess I just said the word predatory before, and there is no better word to describe this industry as far as if something's happened to you and you've experienced childhood trauma, it's taking you down this path, and for whatever reason, gambling gave you that escape from it. And then when you needed to escape that addiction, this industry then preys on you and your vulnerabilities. It's evil, but it's also really heartbreaking. To hear that.
even when it was at its worst, it was during COVID. I was living by myself. Everyone was disconnected during that period. And I was working from home, and the one industry that remained open that whole time was horse racing. And if anything, they put on more horse races during that time. So I would have my screen up, I'd be working, and for about 10 hours during the day, I would have Sky Racing up. So I'd be working, and then every couple of minutes, I'd just be putting bets on. And looking back on it, like I can't understand how, like Melbourne goes into like the biggest lockdown in the world, yet why does the horse racing industry remain open? It's almost like they know that people feel disconnected, they're struggling, and it was, probably the hardest time for a gambler, yet you can turn on the TV.
Predatory.
Yeah.
There was one story in particular that you told us when we met you in the cafe, which was the story of you when you were in rehab. Do you mind telling that story about you watching the grand final?
Yeah, so it was September. It was actually, this time 2 years ago that I was in rehab. And on the weekend, you get a little bit more free time. So the AFL grand final was on. And we all sat down, had a barbecue.
And how many of you are there like there?
This facility held up to 8 people.
Okay.
At this time, there probably would have been about 5 of us.
Okay. All gambling addiction?
No, so I was only the second gambler to go through the rehab in 2 years.
Whoa.
So mostly alcoholics and drug addicts. So we all wanted to watch the footy, and it was just difficult wanting to watch a game that I love, where after every goal that was kicked, the first ad was always a betting ad.
And you're in rehab.
And I'm in rehab for my gambling addiction. So it was like I would be watching the footy, and then I'd have to almost turn away, or the staff member who was on at the time would try and mute the TV. But it's just so difficult. And I also shared when we met up as well that even just checking the footy fixtures, like I scroll through the AFL app, and under each team, it's got the betting odds. So it's impossible for me to check the fixtures without looking at the odds. And at the start of my recovery, I spent probably 15, 20 minutes trying to find the settings on how I can remove what the betting odds are, because that was a trigger for me. But there's no way possible to get rid of the odds.
Can you watch sport?
Yeah, I can watch sport now. I spent probably the first few months when I left rehab where I didn't watch any TV, just because of those ads. And even driving and listening to the radio, there were ads where I'd quickly switch off the radio station. But I'm at a point now where I can watch sport, and it just is obviously frustrating, knowing that there's people out there who are like me at the start of recovery, who want to be able to watch sport, who struggle.
And I could say equally as frustrating or as evil is that there are young boys out there watching that who are having gambling normalised from such a young age.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the ads, their ads are so good, they're so funny, and they're just a level above any other ad.
And also like meeting you and having like my perception of what the kind of average gambling guy is, like, not that that's, but your age, I would say, like, you know, as a sort of younger male, and those ads are like targeted right at that guy.
And the people they get on, like celebrities promoting gambling.
Yeah.
It's just targeted for that younger audience. And it's just like an Australian part of culture now, like gambling. Like it's almost like you're un-Australian if you don't like have a punt. Like it's just so accepted.
Well, but the point I was making was that when you actually look at these ads, and when I say they're great ads, I need to be very clear. The one with Mark Wahlberg is the worst ad I've ever seen in my entire life. But the other ones that are clearly, they're very funny. And the more you watch them and the more I've thought about them, they're not targeted towards like me, like a 43-year-old. They are targeted, it's like boy humor. And to me, that's them trying to normalize gambling from a young age. And so kids watch the footy.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be saying boys and girls, especially now with this incredible surge in women's sport. I mean, it's not just sport. I mean, if you last year at the Super Bowl, Sportsbet were taking odds on what Rihanna was going to be wearing in the halftime entertainment. So, I mean, that's probably not targeted towards men, that one. That is an attempt to try and get girls interested in and normalising the process of betting on what someone could be wearing, for example. But at the moment, if you look at the ads, they're trying so hard to normalise it to kids, normalise it to them, make it entertaining to them, make it exciting to them. And so, yes, for you, trying to come out of recovery, you can't watch sport because of that. But I also look at the other side of what they're trying to do. When you actually look at it, it's quite obvious, and it's predatory and it's really evil.
Yeah.
And especially sport, like sport could be an escape for you.
Yeah.
Like it could be. But unfortunately, the way the ads work, it's just not.
The betting thing is so normalised. Like I'm in all my mates from school, as a social thing to stay in touch, started a punters club, which I think is incredibly common. And it's been around for a while, and we go on a trip together each year, and it's like, and there's a window of betting throughout the year that's kind of organised. And so this group is sort of filled with a lot of people that don't bet and some that bet a lot. But the whole fact that that is the glue that is used as a social connector and a reason to chat a bit and then go away, I don't think I'd really questioned it that much until recently, because I love my friends and I really like seeing them, but I feel a bit kind of dirty that I didn't think twice about what was being used as a connective tissue here.
Yeah.
And I wonder, there's a chance I'll listen, so obviously they can't say, but there's every chance that one of those guys is like Jack. There's every chance one of those guys has like a secret addiction.
Well, one of the things I find weird is that that story about the guy calling you, I feel a bit disgraceful that didn't shock me that much as you guys.
Really?
I feel like I knew that was happening.
I didn't
to a
know
degree.
that. Oh, yeah.
Maybe not a phone call, but I knew that you'd be getting like offers,
prompts.
And promos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's become so normalised that that's a thing.
Yeah.
I knew, I had heard that if you hadn't bet on the punt for a while, they would then send a thing saying this offers for you.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was
I didn't, and also the fact that there's like just the logistics that there's like an account. There's a person there who knows who you are and who is fostering a relationship with you. It reminds me of I don't know if anyone's seen Dope Sick, but it reminds me of basically the tactics of the OxyContin pharmaceuticals in the 90s.
Of the salespeople.
Who would develop relationships with the doctors to
all right.
Yeah.
So there's the analogy I was searching for before.
It's pretty it's awful. Yeah. And the fact that you can't, as you said before, someone who's trying to quit smoking can't just sneak a dart at the office under the desk for 5 seconds and then get back to working. Yeah. There's a lot more barriers in place, and it's been driven to a point of social unacceptability. Vapes is a whole other issue, but whereas, it reminds me, to me, it seems more like there's other problems out there. I think porn addiction would be a closer problem, but even then, you don't have porn companies or Pornhub calling you up saying, here's some new content.
Yeah.
There's no one prompting you.
They're certainly not saying, do you want to come to our box? We won't include that.
I will find it very hard to have that included.
But you're right, Josh.
Yeah.
You're right. It's
but you're prompted, I think, with the relationship to porn and the way advertising and body images and porn has been normalised with advertising. There's prompts every second of the day and everything in phones, on TV. I think the porn industry. Ironically, the porn industry doesn't sound anywhere near as bad, but it's on a continuum, and it's a insidious thing that is really almost impossible to escape.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll probably add, you mentioned The Office before, the toxic culture that I was working in, being in stockbroking, where often I'd walk into the office and a lot of the advisors would own racehorses. So I'd walk into the office and on our floor there was 4 TV screens, which normally would have like the business news or what the markets are doing that day. But every now and then I'd walk in and the races would be on, and the whole office would be watching the races, and everyone would be shouting out what their bets are. And I would always have to lie about how much I'm putting on just because I was so ashamed of it. And then that would just set me off, where for the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on the work I was doing. And instead, I was going to the toilet every 30 minutes, putting more bets on. So just being in that culture as well, where, there's just such a betting culture. And
certainly don't feel the need to say how much you're putting on, because like there's a part of me that wants to know the number, but at the same time, I don't expect you to say it. But I am really interested in knowing, like, you're working in stockbroking, so I imagine that's relatively well paid job. I don't know.
Yep.
Is it getting bad enough that you're like kind of week to week paychecks?
Yeah.
Like having to sell things, is it getting that bad? Is it?
I fortunately didn't have to sell anything or steal from others. I had taken money from Dad probably 5-6 years ago, but I guess as I was earning more, I could use more of that money for betting, but I was definitely paycheck to paycheck, to a point where if I knew I was getting paid tomorrow, I would have no money in my account. So
because you just put all the bets on knowing that the money's going to come in.
Yeah, coming in tomorrow, and then I'd repeat that process for 2 weeks.
And would that money go essentially straight into your betting accounts?
Yeah, the way I worked was I would always deposit a small amount and think, all right, as soon as that runs out, I'm done.
Yeah.
But then if you look at my bank statements, I would have up to 50 or 60 deposits for one day. So
for one day?
Yeah.
Wow. Did you ever feel, because I think we're spending a fair bit of time in the dark time here.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel...
You want to hear about the positive gambling stories?
No. I want to fight for the little guy.
Tell us about the wins.
You want to know about my biggest win?
Yeah. No.
Can I just say one thing before we go to that? 'Cause
Yeah.
I think it's a really natural progression. It's just something I wanted to say before we move on to that. It's just that I feel like people from the industry or gambling companies are listening going, but this is such an atypical experience. This is just like such an extreme example. It is, and it's not the typical experience of someone who's in gambling. But when you look at the number of people who are gambling, as we said at the top of the show, we are still talking about probably hundreds of thousands of people who are in a similar situation. So these are, yes, it's atypical. Yes, it's not the common experience. We are still talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of young people's lives who are being ruined by this.
And I'll probably add, like, I'm not against, like, if my friend's going to the races, like, I'm all for him to go and enjoy himself, go and put a few bets on if he doesn't have a gambling problem. And most of my friends can go to the races. If there's 9 races, put a bet on each of those races and then walk away. And if they've lost a certain amount of money, that's it. Like, they're not going to chase those losses. But where it becomes a problem, and in AA there's a saying where one drink's too many and 1,000's never enough. So relating that back to gambling, if I put that one bet on, I know that I've crossed that invisible line and I'll be putting 100 bets on that day. So I just wasn't in that position to be able to step away. But as you said, Hugh, there's a lot of people out there who can step away. But for me, as soon as I crossed that line, I was done for the day.
The tricky thing for me, though, hearing that is that, as you've said, putting a bet on can be done so easily. I know a lot of friends who bet, but it's almost impossible. It's really hard to know which one of them, because statistically, some of my friends are probably going to have problems with gambling, or if not now, they will at some point in their life. And it's really hard to know who that is.
I think it's very, the fact that you can have such an uncynical view of gambling in terms of other people is actually quite amazing to me. Have you put much thought into like what you think needs to change in terms of like gambling in Australia? Like, is that something, I mean, you don't feel like you need to make a big statement about it.
I think leading into this podcast, like, I naturally was thinking about kind of that question. I think the biggest things is the ads, just banning ads, because that obviously, it does a lot of damage.
That was a big thing for you. That was
huge for me. and just probably creating more awareness, which, coming onto this podcast is obviously very nerve-wracking. And I spoke to my sponsor, and he just pointed out that you are doing service work, which is a big part of the program, by coming onto this and doing this podcast, and I guess overcoming my fears of talking to you three, who I've looked up to a lot, and the podcast has helped me a lot the last few years as well. But just coming on here, even if it can just help one gambler out there who I can make aware, like if I'd known about Gamblers Anonymous 3-4 years ago, there's a high chance that I would have gone to a meeting. So
do you think seeing the ads, do you think if there were no ads, it may be a hard thing to answer, but if there were no ads, do you think your gambling would have got as bad?
It's hard to say. Yeah, I think it just prompts you. Like when I was seeing an ad, that would just be like, oh, I'll put one bet on, and then it would just go from there. So,
if someone called me every couple of weeks and said, "Hey, you haven't been on Instagram in a little while. You know, there's a few of your friends have put up some pretty
good stuff.
Interesting stuff,
and here's some money.
I'll pay you to go on. Yeah, do you want to come to our offices? come and check it out.
Drinks.
Yeah. This might be a strange thing to bring up, but I've only ever heard about the various anonymous programs, and we were chatting a little bit before about it. And as a non-religious person, I thought if I ever needed something like that, maybe I wouldn't be able to go to an anonymous thing, because I know that there is my understanding of it is that it sort of began in a religious world, and that for me can be a barrier.
Yeah, definitely. And as I was saying before, like it's difficult because a lot of meetings, like fellowship meetings, so whether that's GA, AA, NA, a lot of them are held in churches, which in itself would probably deter a lot of people. And they do refer to the word God. And when I first went into rehab, I came across this and I was like, that's not me. Like, I'm not a religious person at all. I hardly go to church. Might have been dragged there when I was younger, but one of the guys I was in rehab with, he was really anti-religion. And the therapist said to him, like, God, you can make that word into whatever you want. And for him, he's used it as an acronym for great outdoors.
Oh,
because he loved, whenever he got overwhelmed, he would jump on his electric skateboard, and we're up in the hills out near Dandenong, and he would just jump on his electric skateboard and just go flying through the trees.
That's brilliant.
So
just flying through God.
Yeah. So that helped him a lot overcome that kind of barrier. And like for me, the word God and higher power are very interchangeable. And for me, like at the start, the higher power for me was just the meetings. Like at rehab, it got pushed into you do 90 meetings in 90 days, which I did. And I would feel so like this energy, like so powerful after a meeting. Like I would drive home, be blasting the radio, singing along. People would have looked at me like, where's that guy been? And they just gave me like a safe space where I could talk about my addiction, but also just talk about life. Like being someone who has struggled to get things off their chest, I could stand up in front of everyone and just like talk about my emotions. I could cry. And it was a place where like crying isn't a sign of weakness. Like people cry in GA all the time, and it's like you get so much out of that.
Yeah, it became the new normal.
Yeah, exactly. So especially being like a young male as well, like I don't know, I feel like I would never show any weakness to my mates, but so GA, like the meetings was my high power, and then like every morning I do a prayer. It's not to like necessarily a God, but it just helps me, like whoever, if there is something out there, me doing a prayer every morning and just asking for guidance kind of gets me through. But
I guess it's like when you're at a certain point in your life, you are just really looking for anything to grab a hold of. You know, you're falling into a big hole. You're just like just randomly grabbing rocks, twigs, just anything, just keep me up.
Yeah.
And even if you're not a religious person, a prayer, which can sometimes evoke like, ooh, prayer, but if that helps, then that's brilliant.
Yeah, and just having faith. Like I couldn't when I was in my active addiction, I couldn't go 1 or 2 days without gambling. And it was 2 years yesterday that I've stopped gambling, stopped drinking, stopped taking drugs. And like that.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank
Amazing.
you.
That is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I should have done this yesterday. This episode.
I actually saw the date and I was like, that date looks familiar, but it was yesterday.
So just hearing you today so beautifully articulate your journey, what you've been through, the heartache of it. You said earlier on that you were a really poor communicator and communication was something you were just terrible at or you didn't really do.
Yeah.
How have you made this ginormous leap to be this incredible communicator now?
Yeah, so it would have started when I was in rehab. So you work through like a program. It's loosely based on the 12 steps. And within the first probably 3 or 4 days, they get you to sit in front of all the other clients and the staff and you tell your story. And it's advised that you tell as much as possible. And that was the first time that I'd told, a group of people everything about me. Just sitting in front of everyone, talking for 20 minutes, and the story that I tell, naturally I felt a lot of shame about, just because of the way I'd acted. But after I'd shared my story, everyone stood up, gave me a hug, and just said, like, it's okay, you're loved, don't be so hard on yourself. And everyone in that room had been through, obviously not identical stories, but had been through similar stories. Most of the people in that room had some sort of childhood trauma. And just to feel that love in the room and be like, that was the first time I was like, how am I not being judged for this? Like, it was, it just felt like such a safe space. And I've carried that through now into GA, where I would stand up in front of everyone and just spill my beans. And if you're struggling, like you can tell people you're struggling and people are there to support you. I have GA members like messaging me throughout the week, just checking in, see how you're going. So yeah, obviously communication hasn't become natural for me just because of like I've gone so long of keeping secrets, but just practicing every week through GA and through the meetings has helped a lot.
It's always just so nice to hear when people, because it's probably rarely happens that people don't support their loved ones when they are so vulnerable like you were. But I'm kind of interested to hear, like, was there a specific example of one person who, when you told them, you were like, that is how you support, but like that support is exactly what I needed?
Yeah. It would have been the first night in rehab. I was scared shitless, obviously. Like just did not know like what I was doing. And every Monday night they do an aftercare program where everyone who was in rehab comes back together, and it's more just a check-in. So helps out those clients who've left and still want to stay connected. And I remember that night the meeting was on. And I was just in tears. I was an absolute mess. And
you were speaking?
I briefly shared, but
Okay.
I struggled to get words out.
Because this is your first night.
Yeah, first night. And I stood up there, introduced myself, maybe said a few more words, and then sat back down. The other gambler before me, he finished the meeting just by spending probably 5-10 minutes just talking directly to me and just saying, you're in the right place. You'll get through this. Here's my number. I'm going to support you throughout this whole way. And I was just bawling my eyes out because I had never experienced that before, that someone who had been through similar stuff to me, he was probably 6 months out of rehab, he was in a good place, and someone being so, I guess, selfless and just wanting to help me so much meant the world. Yeah.
Have you had the opportunity to do that for someone else?
Yeah, so I, probably a couple of months ago, someone in GA actually reached out to me and said, do you want to come into rehab? We've got a young gambler. He's struggling to relate to like a lot of the older members and a lot of the older people in rehab. So can you come in and speak to him for an hour? So I went into rehab and sat down with him. He was about 1 week in. He was quite young, like early 20s, had a gambling problem. So I was able to kind of give back and hopefully help him a little bit.
How did that feel?
I was nervous, but it felt amazing. Like I left there, and just felt like even if I could just help him in one small way, and just telling him like you're not alone. Like there are so many people struggling, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. I told him my story. I've probably told my story 100 times now, and I always feel buzzed after it. Where it's weird in the past, like I really struggled to tell my story, and now like I love doing it because I feel this sense of elation for like the next few days. Just because it's something I can be proud of now. Like I can own it. It's who I am. I shouldn't be ashamed of it. I'm proud.
Because I imagine you get this response every time you tell it, which is like people like so grateful and it's the most impressive thing you can do.
Yeah.
And it's this like, I feel like everyone that comes on this podcast and is vulnerable about their life and tells the thing that they thought they would never tell.
Yeah.
I would say most of them have that exact same experience. I certainly had it when I told like the things that I thought I'd never tell on this podcast. It is so freeing.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you get excited about telling it because it's like, oh, this people like this when I'm vulnerable.
And so a couple of years ago, I being a gambler as well, when you stop gambling, you have so much free time. And Saturday for me used to just be gambling and at the pub, and I was like, how can I fill that void? And I actually got back into cricket 2 years ago, and that was just perfect for me because it took up most of Saturday. And 2 seasons ago, I just left rehab and got back into cricket. And I just, before one of the games, made a passing comment to one of the boys. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a father like in a couple of months. They're like, whoa, like where did that come from? And then, it was during our cricket warm-up where I just unloaded. All the boys were just kind of captivated by my story. It kind of took over from the actual warm-up. I don't know how much stretching the boys were doing, but
both teams just sitting on the pitch. Just listening.
Almost felt like story time. I think we had a delayed start or something. But that was amazing. And I felt good after that, obviously.
Well, you hit vulnerability for 6.
Yeah, exactly. Great pun. But
he's done better.
Thanks, Hugh.
For the rest of the day, I had like boys coming up to me being like, oh, Jack, like, I'm going to be honest, I really struggled with my gambling during COVID. Like, I don't know if it's a problem. So throughout the day, like I had individuals coming up to me and like wanting to talk about gambling and opening up about things that they're going through that might not even be gambling related. But by sharing your story, you open up that door and you tell people like it's okay to talk. And it just like strengthens relationships as well. Like I love the cricket team now.
Who do you play for?
Hawthorn.
All right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Good. Not a Hawthorn fan?
Hawthorn is in
Hawthorn Cricket Club.
Right, okay, yeah, cool.
So,
HCC.
that's the one.
Yep.
So for anyone listening right now who is absolutely in the depths of their struggles with gambling and who feels like they have no idea where to go or what to do, first, like if you had to give them a few steps to get started, what do they do now?
Yeah, so I think it was August maybe 21. The government actually released this initiative and it's called Bet Stop, which is safe and free, and it bans you from all apps. So if you think you've got a gambling problem, signing up to Bet Stop, they can't send you any ads. You can't register an account with any new betting company.
How does that work?
I'm not sure.
It literally stops you from
being able to place a bet. So the government must send out just like a blanket email or contact every betting agency. And then whenever there's a new betting agency that pops up, you're not allowed to sign up to that account.
You go on like a block list.
Yeah. So you can either do it for, I don't know, a month if you just want to have a break. But I'm obviously a big fan of just like harm minimization isn't a possibility. Like if you're going to stop, if you're at rock bottom, you need to stop for good. You can't do experimental bets. So, highly recommend Bet Stop. I don't know why it's taken them so long to
I can't believe I've never heard of it.
Yeah, well, it only, I think it was kind of mid-August they released it. And And the government.
Oh, August this year.
Yeah, August this year.
So it's very 2021.
Yeah, so it's very new.
Okay. Wow.
Use BetStop. Come to a meeting. Like, you never leave a meeting feeling worse than when you enter. Like, hi.
But how do they find it?
So go on the Gamblers Anonymous website, and there's a list of meetings. So there's a meeting every day, just in different locations. I think they still do a couple of online Zoom meetings.
And what do they do when they turn up there? What can they expect? Like, do you just turn? Is it like you see in movies when people walk in and people are helping themselves to polystyrene cups?
Cups of tea and coffee. So you walk in, you'll get a little welcome pack, which has like this yellow book that I'm holding that doesn't help anyone listening to the podcast, but we call it the yellow book. So you'll get one of them. You'll get a phone list. So anyone in that meeting who is willing to answer a call at any point during the day or night, there's probably a list of about 10 names. So you'll get that phone list, and if you are at rock bottom, or if you get an urge to gamble, or you are gambling and you want to stop gambling, call anyone on that phone and they'll dedicate as long as you need just to listening and providing some help. There's Gambler's Helpline as well, so if you just Google that. Mm-hmm. Just something I'll add as well is that in terms of rehab and talking about rehab, I do come from a very privileged position, and I know that rehab isn't a possibility for so many given the financial constraints. And I was lucky that I had my mum and dad who were able to financially support. And I do know that there would be some listeners out there who don't have that ability to go to rehab given how expensive it is. And often those people that probably need it the most can't access it. So what I will say is just, go to meetings, and that's probably, I guess, the best avenue to, because a lot of the meetings and working through the 12 steps, which I did with my sponsor, that's loosely based on what we did in rehab. So
I'm struck by how in your story you seem to have been, and fortunate, and not take any credit away from you as a person, but seems like you've been very fortunate and that it's been quite lineal, that you've gone through hell and done all this work and have been able to get over it. But my understanding for addiction is that a lot of people will relapse, and that's not a failure.
Yeah, definitely. And when I was in rehab, it got told that 90% of people do relapse in the first 3 months. So that is very common.
That's the normal experience.
Yeah. And a lot of people, end up going back to rehab. Some of the people that came through, it was their 4th or 5th rehab, and they've been suffering with their addiction for, a long, long time. So it is, I feel very fortunate that I haven't experienced a relapse, but considering, I guess, how tough those first few months especially were, and I guess how many triggers there are out there, it is very common to relapse. But the biggest thing is relapsing, often in GA meetings at the start of a recovery, people come back and say, oh, look, guys, I relapsed, and you get so much strength out of that. People who are able to relapse and still come back to meetings and overcome they feel shame, but you shouldn't feel shameful for relapsing. That's a very common thing. And even some of the members who come to the meetings every week and they've got 20 years up, they relapsed at the start of their recovery often for the first year or two. So it's not this easy fix. And often, people are on their recovery journey for 20 years, and you might be off the punt for 2-3 years and then you relapse. I still have to take each day as it comes, and it's one day at a time, which is one of the sayings in GA. And who knows, something disastrous could happen to me, touch wood, and I could relapse, but it's how I react. I know that the best thing to do if I was to relapse is go to my meeting and just talk about it, because people don't judge you if you relapse. It takes so much strength to be able to put your hand up, say, look, guys, I relapsed. And then that's where other members will get around you and support you. And
It's sort of like the example of just generally in life. It's like everyone falls down, but you got to have like your sort of systems or networks or ways that you can get yourself back up.
Yeah.
And to have that, considering you're so isolated for so long in regards to gambling, must be everything.
Yeah, definitely. It's progress, not perfection. And
Yeah.
like it's so difficult recovery, but as long as you're moving forward, definitely.
Yeah, amazing. And you were saying one day at a time.
Yeah.
What does a day look like for you? Like, have you got a sort of system in place or?
Yeah, so it got drilled into me, I guess, the importance of morning routine. In rehab, I guess there's a big focus on like exercise, for example. I wake up in the morning, I do my morning prayer, I exercise, go to the gym or go for a run. And then after exercise, I do a meditation. I've got the Calm app, I use that. And every day I do my gratitude list. So I write down 10 gratitudes. And there's an app called Spiritual Toolkit, which I use to do that. And I send my gratitude list to my sponsor and my sister, who I got her into it probably about a year ago now, when she was going through a tough time. And so she sends me hers and my sponsor sends me theirs. And yeah, that just helps me a lot.
That's every day.
Every day I do a gratitude list.
Wow.
Every day I meditate, do exercise, and do my morning prayer. So,
and that routine's really helped?
Yeah, massively. The big thing for me, like especially at the start, was if I get up early and if I can do all those things and it gets to 8:30 and I can say to myself, like, look, you've achieved something today. The other thing they drill into you is make your bed. Apparently that's very underestimated the impact that can have. So yeah, if I can get to 8:30 and just tick off all those things and I've started the day well and I'm in the best place possible to get through that day, that helps a lot. And yeah, they say just break it down into days, but to be honest, at the start of your recovery, you probably have to break it down into hours. So if you just say, all right, for the next hour, I'm not going to put a bet on. And then that hour passes and then just say to yourself, look, next hour, I'm not going to put a bet on. So when you're really struggling, breaking it down into days like almost seems too big of a task.
Well, if you're at your worst, you're making 50 or 60 deposits a day. Yeah. It can turn so quickly.
Yeah.
How big a part of your recovery was talking to your friends and family about it? Because I guess a lot of people might think, I don't have to tell anyone. I can just go to Gamblers Anonymous and do it, on my own. Like, how big of a part of that was that for you? Yeah,
for me it was huge. I know some of the newer members that come through GA, like they haven't told their family or their partner, and they could often go months without telling them or opening up. But for me, it's just,
which I imagine is fine to do it that way.
Completely fine.
Yeah.
But it's just, I guess, cleaning that slate and just being able to be as open as possible. And it strengthened my relationships, like with my family. And yeah, my partner now, like we have such a strong relationship built on trust that I can communicate as open as possible with her and she communicates back. And it's the first relationship I've been in where like I've felt that. So yeah, and that's kind of stemmed from having that conversation about, I guess, my past, my gambling, my actions, the fact I'm my dad. So yeah, it all stems from there.
Amazing.
You've obviously taken on a lot yourself, and with Gamblers Anonymous, there's a lot on the individual to make the changes. I think it's probably also worth acknowledging it needs to come from both sides as well. Industry needs to change as well as the individual. Yeah, it's not just down to...
Yeah, massively. And I think like a big problem at the moment is there is so much money involved for like broadcasters to play gambling ads, and the government itself, like they must get so much money from gambling and the racing industry. So it's going to be like hard to shift that. But even just at the moment, getting rid of ads I just see that as like a big win. And then
hopefully human suffering is enough to convince them.
Yeah. And I think like the more people talk about it as well, like it's not this taboo topic. Like. Yeah,
absolutely. More conversations.
And a big thing as well, I flagged earlier that I'm doing a master of teaching and I work at a school at the moment whilst I'm studying. And in one of the boarding houses, and like I can see firsthand how much of a problem it is for 15, 16-year-olds. Like I would wake up the boys, I'd be on morning wake up, and a couple of times it's happened where I'd be standing at the top of the stairs and boys would be walking up the stairs just scrolling through a betting company. And I think there does need to be tighter restrictions on being able to open an account, and even if, like, let's say they're using a parent's account or an older brother's account, there needs to be, stricter rules around like who can use that account. Because it's so damaging. Like, fortunately, like I'm 2 years on now, and I was working at the school on a Saturday with the boarders, and I heard the races go on in the room next door, and I quickly like ran in and was like, boys, you shouldn't be watching this. Like, you're 15, 16. Like, why are you watching the races? And they're, but my friend's dad has a horse in this one. So it's just, even being in a school environment, it's so common. And schools, like I've witnessed, are so, like, they're coming down so hard on things like vaping and creating awareness around alcohol and drugs, which is obviously so important. But I haven't heard one conversation about gambling or the harm that can cause.
Well, I reckon you'll be the one who started this conversation, mate.
Yeah.
It's, you very kindly said that, you look up to us, but I think after this, we look up to you way more than you could ever look up to us. I feel like what you have done right here is really incredible. And it's a level of vulnerability. And I know, it's like there's an anonymous aspect to it, of course, understandably. But of course, your friends and everyone will know that this is you.
Yep.
I just think it's just so inspiring what you're doing, speaking on this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, if we choose to put it out, I don't know.
Got to spend time with you three, so it's worth it for me.
Jack, thank you so much for the letter you wrote me in the first instance, coming and saying hi to us in that cafe, then sharing your story with us, giving us a little sneak peek. And then today, as Ryan said, that's vulnerability like I probably haven't seen before. It's beautifully told.
It's great outdoors level vulnerability.
Everyone's going to be outside praying to nature.
We love you. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's
pleasure.
Just been so great having you.
No, pleasure.
And
Thanks,
congratulations.
guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Cheers.
Just cut the cord and it'll be alright. Just cut the cord. Can I be a fascination?
The Imperfects is hosted and produced by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, Ryan Shelton and Josh Van Cuylenberg. Our executive producer is Bridget Northeast. This episode is filmed by Andy Poole and edited by George Martin. The Imperfects is not a licensed mental health service and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, treatment or assessment. The advice given in this episode is general in nature, but if you're struggling, please see a healthcare professional or call Lifeline on 131114.